everybody. I'm Jen Latta, filling in for Molly Kieram. Skip Bayless here in studio with me. Stephen A. joining us from Toronto. How's everybody doing? Holiday weekend.
Good morning. Good morning, Jen. Welcome to the show. What's up, Skip? How you doing, big boy?
I'm doing all right, but I got to say, if you had been in studio today, I don't think Molly's missing a day with you in studio. That's just me. That's just me. So I think Jen might be a little more objective about me here in the studio, so maybe I have a little better chance at this show today.
Well, only couple of things that I'd like to say is that it's no surprise that the ladies prefer to be with me in studio as opposed to you. But the exception would be the lovely Ernestine. And last time I checked, as long as you have her, that is all you are supposed to need, Skip Bayless.
That is correct. Truer words have never been spoken on this show before.
Then stop whining.
All right.
Then stop whining.
I am loving the love fest we are starting with. It's a good way to kick off the holiday weekend. Let's get to our topics. The Warriors able to stave off elimination and force a Game 6 back in OKC on Saturday night. Steph Curry led Golden State with 31 points, while the Thunder got 71 combined from Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. Not much help from anyone else, though. So, Stephen A., what was the difference last night?
Well, I think the difference last night is that you got surprising production from frontline players. Andrew Bogut had 15 points, 14 rebounds. Maurice Spates scored 9 quick points in the second quarter, ultimately finished with 14 points. That's 29 points of production. You pretty much did not expect even half that much from your front line. So the fact that the big boys showed up and produced, obviously that went a long way. Steph Curry caught fire at the right time, particularly in the fourth quarter. Give him credit where credit is due. He and Klay Thompson were not that stellar from the field, 9 for 28 for 21 respectively, combining 5 for 17 from three-point range. They could do better. They know they could do better, but ultimately they did what was necessary. You look at a Draymond Green, for example. He wasn't stellar himself offensively, but he did have a double-double. He did grab rebounds. He did block shots. He did make sure that his presence was felt. And the energy that you needed, you got from the individuals that you needed to get it from. So as a result of that, Golden State definitely was able to stave off elimination for at least one game and escape and on their home court with this victory. But I'll remind everybody that Kevin Durant had 40, but it was on 31 shots. That Russell Westbrook was doing his thing, but he was struggling from the field himself. I don't anticipate that they're going to struggle that much back home at Oklahoma City. They were still in this game when Russell Westbrook and those boys forced Steph Curry to turn that ball over, Skip, late in the fourth quarter, and they went down court. Had Kevin Durant hit that three-pointer, it would have pulled OKC within 3 with 30-plus seconds left, which means they would have had a chance to win this game. So I think about the way that they struggled from the field. I think about the fact that Steven Adams had 2 fouls within the first 3 minutes. I think about the fact that they were anything less than stellar and far removed from their performances in Game 3 and 4 back in OKC, yet they were still in position to win this game. There's no dissipation in confidence whatsoever. I anticipate that the Oklahoma City Thunder, albeit with the pressure mounting on their shoulders because they need to win Game 6 and avoid a return to the Oracle for Game 7, I just believe that the way they're looking right now, their confidence hasn't waned one bit. They're confident they can get the job done, and I anticipate that that's exactly what their mindset is. So to me, the Golden State Warriors are still in trouble because they would need to play better than they did last night, because I have no doubt that OKC is going to play better than they did last night.
I'll buy that. I'll buy your conclusion. I'll buy that Golden State wasn't particularly impressive last night. I frankly didn't think Steph Curry was all that much Steph Curry last night, though he did some big little things, as you point out, late that turned the tide, or at least held off the rally. Now, back to Jen's question. The biggest difference last night to me was Steve Kerr and the changes and adjustments that he did finally make in this series. And I'm going to say this again. I thought after Games 3 and 4, Steve Kerr took excessive criticism from all quarters. I thought bordered on brutal criticism. And so today, I'm going to give him some credit for what I thought was a seismic shift in strategy in this series. Turned the tables last night, may not turn them in Game 6, but it was significant last night that Steve Kerr abandoned his, as they called it, the death lineup, his small ball lineup that devastated the NBA for all of this season, for most of these playoffs. The small ball death lineup that Billy Donovan has been destroying with his small ball lineup featuring Serge Ibaka at center. Steve Kerr last night fought small with big, with Andrew Bogut, who played 30 minutes of that game and came up huge for Golden State, as you know. Game-changing, 14 rebounds, 15 points on 7 of 9 shots. From a guy in the past, you've called him, I've used your nickname too, Bogus. He was Bogut last night. He was a difference in the game, but that strategy was the difference in the game. And to me, that coupled with what Steve Kerr did early in the fourth quarter, you want to talk about some gutsy coaching move? How about let's keep Steph and Draymond and Bogut on the bench for the first 4 minutes of the fourth quarter while the backups, the Livingstons, the Barbosas, the Spates, went on a 15-8 run that changed that game and gave Golden State a cushion that it would need. Because you're right, Kevin Durant had a wide-open look that could have cut it to 3 with 30 seconds left, and then who knows what would have happened. I still figure Steph would have done whatever was necessary to save the day. But my point is, if we're going to bash Steve Kerr, let's applaud what he did last night, because it took some guts and it took some savvy. And I thought he coached last night like he was the coach of the year. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let me tell you something. I don't disagree with the facts that you've spewed about Steve Kerr and what he did last night, but I take exception to the notion that Steve Kerr has been somehow victimized. The fact of the matter is, I would think that Steve Kerr has received the longest honeymoon of any coach out there. This guy comes in, takes over for Mark Jackson, inherits a relatively finished product as far as I'm concerned. He's got a great owner in Lacob. He's got a great consultant in Jerry West. You know, GM in Myers. The foundation is as perfect as you could possibly imagine it. And he finished the deal and deserved credit for it. His health becomes a challenge. Ultimately, he misses the first 43 games of this year. Luke Walton steps in, guides them to 24-0 for the first 24 games, 39-4 over the first 43 games. Steve Kerr comes back in, coaches the last 39 games, goes 34-5, and somehow, some way is named the coach of the year. Meanwhile, Steph Curry, on far many occasions, shows that there are no plays that are actually taking place when he exhibits his heroics. I'm not saying that Steve Kerr doesn't coach, draw plays or anything like that, but we've seen breakdowns on many occasions. We've seen competition, opponents acknowledge that the man excels, meaning Steph Curry, because he takes bad shots. Well, why are they bad shots? Because there's somebody in his face. There's somebody that's there to contest what he's doing, and somehow, some way, because of his marksmanship, he makes the shot, and somehow, some way, we're ballyhooing Steve Kerr as the second coming. Well, there's a lot of coaches that would win championships if they had a player like Steph Curry when plays break down or when somebody's in his face and they're just making miraculous shots. So much so that even Steve Kerr jokes about it. When Steph Curry makes miraculous plays, Steve Kerr has been seen in press conferences or mic'd on the bench while talking to Luke Walton. Talk about that's some great coaching, ain't it? Obviously speaking facetiously and joking. And so when you look at it from that perspective, outside of this series, tell me when anybody has insulted or criticized Steve Kerr. Nobody has bothered this man. I'm tired of folks, you know, like yourself, walking around acting like somehow, some way, this guy has been victimized. He was called out because Billy Donovan was coaching his butt off and Steve Kerr wasn't. He showed up last night and did one hell of a job coaching the Golden State Warriors. But for the most part, he's been given a pass. Nobody has bothered Steve Kerr at all. So I really don't know what you're talking about. I really don't.
What I'm talking about is, as I told you 2 days ago, I can't criticize Steve Kerr. I can only applaud Billy Donovan because I couldn't figure out, I couldn't see any glaring weakness in strategy where I say, you got to change that. You got to fix that. So I didn't want to be a hypocrite about it because all of a sudden it looked like Billy Donovan just had the two best players on the floor, and it is hard to deal with those two guys when they are doing what they are capable of doing. The whole Oklahoma City team, it took off, it arrived, it grew up. It found itself. It figured it out right on time. And again, is that Steve Kerr's fault? So I was just saying, show me what he needs to do. Then he showed me last night, that worked. I wouldn't have thought of that.
But wait a minute. Wait a minute, Skip. That's my point. I'm saying if you're going to acknowledge that Billy Donovan is doing something, you're saying, well, give Billy Donovan credit as opposed to Steve Kerr blame.
Yep.
And I'm saying you're giving Billy Donovan credit, but in the process of giving him credit, he too is going up against somebody. If Russell Westbrook drops 36, 11, and 11, we found ourselves talking about Steph Curry, didn't we? If Kevin Durant drops 40 or 50, we'll find ourselves talking about Klay Thompson or Draymond Green or somebody, right? How come we can do that with players, but when a coach is coaching his butt off, we'll ignore the coach he's competing against? That doesn't make any sense. And oh, by the way, just like you pointed out that Steve Kerr stepped up in Game 5 last night, I can make the argument, then why the hell didn't you do it in Games 3 and 4? Why? That's the point. That's what coaching is. So, yeah, he figured it out for one game, and he deserves credit for that. And nobody's trying to take any credit away from this man. He has proven he can coach. Just like in Phoenix, he proved to be a solid executive. And as a player, he's a 5-time champion. We respect Steve Kerr, but that doesn't mean that he's above reproach, that his stuff doesn't stink, that when he passes gas, it's perfume all of a sudden. No, it stinks. Okay? And if Billy Donovan is coaching better than you, then I have a right to sit up there and point that out without it being, surmised or interpreted as, oh, you're blaming Steve Kerr. No. Just like if one player is going up against another player, I will point out the high and the low.
Okay.
I get allowed to do the same thing with coaching.
You do.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing's wrong with it, but 2 shows ago, obviously we didn't have one yesterday, I thought you were really hard on Steve Kerr. You brought it up repeatedly through the show, and I was okay with it because he deserved to be put on the hot seat. And I told you on the air, I get it. I don't want to be a hypocrite because I don't see the fix. So you kept calling him out and calling him out, and then I thought it was apropos that I start off today's show by saying, well, guess what? He responded last night, and I think you agree, he really responded, right?
He did respond. He did respond. But all that did was validate the criticism that I threw his way after Games 3 and 4. Because why the hell did you do it then? What you waited 2 games for?
You know why?
How come you couldn't have figured it out after 1?
Here's why. They won an NBA record 73 games. And if I may hark back to an old Texas expression used mostly in football, you dance with who brung you, meaning however you got there, however you got that far, you keep doing what you do best. What they do best is the death lineup, the small ball. Nobody could deal with it. And all of a sudden, especially in Oklahoma City, the small ball death lineup was dying. It was getting run off the floor. I don't blame Steve Kerr for saying, I'm going to hang with it until, we're down 3-1. So that was the fix. And he pushed all the right buttons last night with some of his backups. Now, again, it's easier to play backups at home, as you well know. We'll talk about that a little later with Oklahoma City's backups. But my point is, I thought Steve Kerr was masterful last night and saved the day with his strategic changes.
And I'm saying he deserved credit for it, but it also validates why he deserved blame in Games 3 and 4, because it should not have taken him that long. And what you're speaking about is layman's terms. The novice sitting on the outside looking in and saying, hey, you know what? Maybe he should do X, Y, and Z, or maybe he should, you stick with what brung you there, to use your vernacular. The reality is that we're not the coach of the Golden State Warriors. He is. He ain't supposed to be doing what we think he should do. He's supposed to know better than us, which he obviously did last night. I'd also like to remind you that, Skip Bayless, when you covered the Chicago Bulls in the 90s and what have you, I remember a Game 6 with the Chicago Bulls playing against the Portland Trailblazers. Now, obviously, Phil Jackson had an individual individual that is universally recognized as the greatest player we've ever seen in Michael Jordan, okay? Michael Jordan owned Clyde Drexler. Michael Jordan was absolutely sensational pretty much in all of the finals. But I remember when Michael Jordan was struggling a little bit in this particular game. I remember when he was on the bench and reserves brought the Chicago Bulls back from a huge deficit against the Portland Trail Blazers before Michael Jordan ultimately came in and finished the deal. But it was after reserves, practically no-name reserves, came in and saved the day. Phil Jackson didn't wait a game or 2 or 3 in order to do that. He coached within the moment. Plenty of coaches coach within the moment. I know that Steve Kerr deserves respect. I'm giving it to him. I know that he's a damn good coach. I'm giving it to him. Only reason I didn't think he was coach of the year was because he only coached 43 games. I'm sorry, 39 games. That's all I was saying.
Okay.
But in the end, don't tell me that I have to handle him with kid gloves and I got to be ultra sensitive. No, Billy Donovan was out coaching him. Okay? Period. He didn't last night.
Nope.
But he did prior to that. That is the fact.
Okay.
And that is it. And it is what it is.
Okay.
He's not a kid. Deal with it.
All right. Now, let's deal with Billy Donovan last night. Just like Steve Kerr couldn't make Steph Curry hit shots in games 3 and 4. And by the way, Steph he only had 3 threes last night. But Billy Donovan couldn't make Durant and Westbrook hit shots last night. Just for the record.
Not at all.
Okay, if we are doling out our criticism or our blame, I thought that Kevin and Russell came out last night and said, we are going to win this game by ourselves. I don't condemn them for that because on the road, it usually requires that your star or your 2 stars do it by themselves because, as we know, traditionally the role players are less consequential on the road. They shrink. They come up smaller. But last night, man, when they combine those 2 stars to take 59 shots and everybody else takes 32 shots, that's not right. They're going to have to fix that when they go back home.
No.
Because, listen, Waiters goes 0 for 4. Cantor goes, 0 for 1? You know and I know you need to get those people involved if you're going to close this out in 6 games.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They made a mistake about that, no question about it, and that's on Billy Donovan. But the biggest thing that's on Billy Donovan is the fact that they gave up 39 points in the 4th quarter to Golden State. That's not something that happened. Just like I called out Steve Kerr for giving up 38, 45,
42,
and 42-point quarters in the series, I'm calling out Billy Donovan for, giving up 39 points. But guess what, Skip? Nobody's going to say anything about that because it's Billy Donovan, and I'm absolutely correct in pointing out that he shouldn't be giving up 39 points in any quarter. But Lord help me if I say that about Steve Kerr. We can't do that about Steve Kerr because we can't touch him. We can't do that. Really? Please.
It will be interesting to see the lineup chess match between these 2 coaches as this series continues. All right, let's move on. After the loss last night, Russell Westbrook was asked whether Steph Curry was an underrated defender. Take a listen. Stephen A., is this a laughing matter?
Yes, it is. Absolutely, without question. And that's no disrespect to Steph Curry. It's about Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is unguardable one-on-one. There is no one in the NBA, there is no one in the world of basketball that can guard Russell Westbrook one-on-one. Nobody. You pick any member of 30 teams in the National Basketball Association. You take the best defensive player, and that includes Kawhi Leonard of the San Antonio Spurs. I don't give a damn who you pick. One-on-one with no help. Guarding Russell Westbrook is as futile as it gets. That assassin that he is, please. It's not. It is laughable. And Steph Curry, obviously a good defender, obviously much improved. He's not an elite defender. Big-time steal, strip of Kevin Durant last night, late in the game, deserves credit for that. Does have good hands, has moved his feet better, is no scrub defensively. But Steph Curry can't guard Russell Westbrook one-on-one. It's impossible. Just like nobody can guard Steph Curry one-on-one. They certainly can't guard Russell Westbrook one-on-one. So I don't blame Russell Westbrook for laughing. Because you know what? When you are as elite of a talent as Russell Westbrook is, and somebody looks at you and says a particular player can guard you one-on-one, I'd laugh too. Especially if it's Steph Curry, because here's why. All the elite point guards in the game, whether it's Chris Paul or anybody else, would tell you that Steph Curry is usually not the one guarding them. It's usually a Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala. Steph Curry might have some spots where he finds himself on them, but for the most part, that's never his responsibility. He's usually the one being hidden. Just like in this series, you saw him on Roberson, or you saw him on a Dion Waiters. Steve Kerr was trying to hide him earlier in this series. And sometimes he found himself on Russell Westbrook, and they were salivating. And why was Oklahoma City looking so lethal in games 3 and 4? It was because primarily whoever Steph was guarding, Billy Donovan made sure those individuals touched the basketball. He wanted guys attacking Steph Curry. When you are an elite defender, they don't do that to you. But when you're not, they'll do it as much as they can. And when you're talking about a Russell Westbrook, who even elite defenders fear the fact that somebody would ask that Steph Curry could guard him one-on-one, all due respect, that's laughable.
Okay, timeout. That was not the question. The question was about whether Steph is an underrated defender. It wasn't about can Steph shut down Russell. That wasn't where it was going. It was just that Steph is so disruptive with 5 more steals. By the way, Steph Curry led the NBA in steals. To Russell's credit, he was second in overall steals. But that was not the question. And by the way, if I'm just comparing them as solo defenders, I think that was the pot laughing at the kettle, because Russell has at least as many on-the-ball deficiencies as Steph Curry does. In fact, I might take Steph as a nose-to-nose defender on anybody over Russell. They both can roam. They have great vision. They have great instincts. Both have very quick and disruptive hands. But as on-the-ball defenders, I got to tell you, Russell, over the years, has not been great. At times, he has been a liability. So I don't want to hear that. And for you to defend his laughing at the 2-time MVP, the unanimous MVP this year, I'm sorry, that's one guy you better not laugh at, because to laugh at Steph Curry is to challenge Steph Curry, and we know what has happened in the past. If you make this slender little 6'3" guard mad, he will burn you. He will burn you down. And I love it that Russell laughed at the question, or stifled laughter at the question.
Yeah, but that's usually because you're missing a point. No surprise there. First of all, we're not talking about Steph Curry's offense. We're talking about Steph Curry's defense. Steph Curry, as far as I'm concerned, is unguardable, too, because he's the greatest shooter on the planet. There's nobody that could guard Steph Curry. Steph Curry will dance on anybody. But just because you drop 50 doesn't mean that you can guard. That's number one. Number two, you are talking on this show to an individual who covered a gentleman by the name of Allen Iverson for the first 10 years of his career. And he was always one of the steals leaders.
He was.
That didn't mean that he could guard somebody one-on-one.
Yep.
It meant he took chances and that he anticipated very well, which Steph Curry does. That's point number two. It's a basketball lesson for you. Point number three, when you look at straight up man-to-man, what happens with Russell Westbrook is that Russell Westbrook is usually trying to take chances because he's usually trying to push the ball up the floor. But when you talk about Russell Westbrook in terms of that's not the question, it doesn't matter what the question is. It was interpreted as that. Is Steph Curry an underrated defender, whatever? Why would Russell Westbrook laugh? Russell Westbrook wouldn't laugh because Steph Curry is sticking Dion Waiters. Russell Westbrook wouldn't laugh because Steph Curry is a sign of Roberson. Russell Westbrook would laugh because Russell Westbrook is imagining, like almost NBA superstar would, that if you address that question to him, you are implying that this kid can guard me. That is the way that basketball players interpret a question like that. So it doesn't matter how the question was framed. It matters how it was interpreted, because why else would Russell Westbrook be laughing at it? So in the end, what it comes down to is this. Russell Westbrook and Steph Curry are both unguardable. They are both lethal offensive players. As far as I'm concerned, there's nobody that can guard either one of them. But to ask Russell Westbrook if Steph Curry, is he an underrated defensive player or whatever, you're essentially asking Steph and Russell Westbrook, can this brother guard you? And to me, Russell Westbrook has a right to laugh at such a notion because as far as I'm concerned, neither of them can guard each other.
That's correct.
And there's no shame in that.
And by
They're
the way,
both too lethal
for
to
the
be
record,
guarded.
the question was asked not to Russell, but to Kevin Durant. So just for the record, Russell's sitting next to him trying to stifle laughter. Okay? So
well, we all know that Steph Curry's not guarding Kevin Durant.
It was just a general question. He had five more steals. He was disruptive on defense. He took the ball away from Kevin Durant at the key moment of the game. Am I right about that? Was that not the key pivotal moment?
Well, I tell you what. Let's take Steph Curry's marksmanship, his elite marksmanship aside, and you have him. Put him on your all-defensive team then, Skip. Go ahead.
I'm not. You gonna put Russell on your all-defensive team? No.
I would trust Russell manning up, on the ball, an on-ball defender. Would I trust Russell Westbrook to man up and accept that challenge more so than Steph Curry? Yeah, I would.
So you're questioning Steph's manhood?
Now you know better.
Okay,
than
well,
that.
it's just coming across that way.
One-on-one defensively. That's ridiculous, Skip.
Okay.
That's ridiculous.
Last question.
I'm talking basketball.
Hypothetically.
Manhood. What are you talking about?
Hypothetically, Russell versus Steph, one-on-one, who wins? Who's your money on?
Steph Curry, because Steph Curry's a better shooter.
That's correct.
That's not the point.
It is to me.
You know what? Let's move on to the next time. I have no time to teach you basketball right now. I don't have any time. I mean, how do you want one or the other? Who wouldn't take the better shooter? Who wouldn't? He's the best shooter in the world.
Yeah, but you're talking about
one-on-one, who would you take?
You'd take the better defender, Russell Westbrook.
And who you're guarding throughout the league.
Okay.
Who you're guarding throughout the league. Who would somebody fear more in terms of defensively? You think about Steph Curry, his offense is his most potent defense. No disrespect. He's a two-time league MVP. He's the greatest shooter I've ever seen.
Okay.
But you don't think about Steph Curry and say, oh, my goodness, defense. You think about Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala on the Golden State Warriors more than you think about Steph Curry defensively.
Russell Westbrook just showed zero respect for Steph Curry. Just remember that. Yeah. Because Steph will remember.
Let me tell you something. Russell Westbrook doesn't need Skip Bayless trying to instigate stuff.
I'm not
so
instigating.
it can be highly competitive. They'll be highly competitive on their own without your help. Trust me.
It reminds me of something my mom and dad used to teach me. You don't need to motivate the enemy any more than they are already motivated.
Good point, Jen.
Up next.
Well, you know what? Hey, you ain't scared of it. You ain't scared. You know what? The elite players ain't scared of the enemies. Let's get it on.
Yep.
I don't think Russell Westbrook's scared.
Let's see what we have coming up next. We'll take a look at the Eastern Conference Finals. Will LeBron finish off the Raptors in their house tonight? That debate after the break.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up. All the way up. I'm all the way up.
Who wins Game 6?
Well, it better be the Cavs. I mean, when you're up by 41, you're blowing them out of the building. You make them look like Skip pointed out earlier in the series like a bunch of mannequins, just non-existent, didn't show up, don't even know why they wasted time going through customs to get to the United States. They wasted everybody's time with their performance in Game 5. If you're the Cleveland Cavaliers and you see how Toronto performed just the other night, why can't you come into Toronto and handle your business if indeed you're a championship caliber team? There's simply no excuse for it. I'm going to repeat this. I think Dwayne Casey has done an exceptional job. Valanciunas coming back, hitting all 4 of his shots in Game 5, still proved to be a defensive liability. Biyombo somehow, some way is allergic to playing once he departs from the border, from the Canadian border, because every time he shows up in the States, he does close to nothing. But in Toronto, he's absolutely sensational, particularly as a defender and a rebounder. And I just look at it from this standpoint that it should be hard fought. There is no doubt. The home crowd will be here. They will be psyched and hyped. Crowd outside in Jurassic Park and inside the building. It should be special. But in the end, they don't have LeBron James. And LeBron James needs to close the deal. LeBron James doesn't need to go the last 5.5 minutes without attempting a shot. He's too big time for that. Make sure he shoots the damn ball. Kevin Love, you showed up the other day, dropped 25. Everybody's making such a big deal about that. I'm not caught up in that. Why? Because it was a lopsided contest. He had all 6 of his shots skip in the first half. He finished with 25 points, but it was a runaway. The question about Kevin Love is not that he can play. We know he can play. We know he has skills. We know he can get it done. The question about Kevin Love is, where are you when the game is tight and waning in the fourth quarter? Can we find you, or do we need to put an APB out for you? That is the question about Kevin Love. So to me, I don't care what he did in Game 5 because it was a lopsided contest. I care about what he's capable of doing when the game is tight, when palms are sweaty, and he's got to show up and produce. But in the end, all Toronto has, essentially, as far as I'm concerned, is Kyle Lowry, who's miniature, very gifted, a rough rider, but I don't think should be able to hang with Kyrie Irving, or at least they'll negate one another. And then, of course, there's DeMar DeRozan, who doesn't shoot threes. And his mid-range game is elite as it may be. As long as his skill set is that way, we got to respect it. But he shouldn't be able to offset or usurp the greatness of LeBron James. LeBron James not only needs to shoot the ball late, but he needs to guard DeMar DeRozan a hell of a lot earlier, not waiting till a guy has 30-plus points before he picks him up defensively. LeBron needs to take on the challenge of guarding DeMar DeRozan earlier so he can nullify and neutralize him. If he does that, and Kyrie negates Kyle Lowry, then you force a Terrence Ross, a DeMar Carroll, and others to step up and do something they're not accustomed to doing, which is why Cleveland shouldn't even have to deal with a Game 7. They should close the deal tonight, and I anticipate that they will.
I cannot tell you how much I agree with every word you just spoke, and then some. To me, speaking of my reference to mannequin defense, what was even more shameful than the mannequin defense that Toronto played in games 1 and 2 at Cleveland was that Cleveland went to Toronto and lost 2 games. I don't get it. I can't fathom it. I can't compute it. I can't explain it. Cleveland is so much better than Toronto. I realize what Jen said, that they lost the 2 regular season games. Now they've lost the 2 postseason games in Toronto. I get that. But this ought to be Cleveland by 15 or 20 points tonight because we've seen how much better they are. Obviously, it's in Cleveland. But Stephen A., if you will, allow me to recite the margins of victory for Cleveland at Cleveland. Game 1 was by 31, Game 2 by 19, Game 5 by 38. And then you go to Toronto and lose by 15 and by 6. And Kevin Love, for whom I have not all that much love, disappears. And Kyrie is not Kyrie. And then the King disappeared down the stretch. It's inexcusable. They've got to right the wrong tonight. I'm with you. That they should just flex their superiority right out of the box and end this thing tonight in 6. And I'll tell you why I think they could psychologically. Help me out with this. Deep down, do you really think the Raptors want to go back to Cleveland and get humiliated one more time, a 4th time? If you look inside their hearts, deep down they got to be thinking, God, do we really want to go back there again? And
I don't think they do. I don't think they do, but I do think their passion to win one last game in front of their home crowd is bigger than their lack of desire to go back to Cleveland.
Maybe. But allow me to give a quick comment to the story. I believe one of the I think it was the Toronto Star had it, that DeMar Carroll, Corey Joseph, 2 good guys, by the way, were hanging out in the casino around 2 a.m. the night before or morning before that Game 5. I don't care about that. The point is, I think Corey and DeMar could have gone to sleep at 6 o'clock and it wouldn't have changed the fate of that game. And by the way, that casino, you know Cleveland a lot better than I do, but it's like within walking distance, right? Isn't it downtown?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Okay, so Okay, so they're just walking through the casino. It's no big deal. It had no impact on Game 5. And you know me with my curfew rule, nothing good happens after midnight, but this is different. This isn't a nightclub or a strip club. It's just walking through the casino, hanging out, killing time. And both those guys, as you know, probably better than me, but I think they're pretty decent guys from all I've heard.
They're pretty decent guys. They don't get in any trouble.
No.
From my understanding, they weren't inebriated. We're not talking about alcohol. We're not talking about weed. We're not talking about trouble or anything. It's guys that couldn't sleep, so decided to go for a walk through the casino, because you certainly don't need to be walking the streets of Cleveland, I can tell you that. But the bottom line is that it's much ado about nothing, and I don't think that it should be a big deal in anybody's eyes.
So what's your gut feeling on the final score?
I think that it'll be tight until the middle of the fourth quarter, and then LeBron James and them will step it up. They'll probably pull away, and I can see them winning by 12, something along the lines of 102-90.
I'm going to go by 15. It has to end tonight. It's time to be over. Put Toronto out of its Cleveland misery.
If it does not end tonight, Cleveland should be ashamed of itself.
That's correct. Agreed.
Well, for note, the home team has won all 8 meetings between the two teams this season. Cavaliers 0-4, as we've mentioned, in Toronto. Game 6 tonight in Toronto, 8:30 on ESPN. As expected, Baylor fired head coach Art Briles yesterday for his role in the school's sexual assault scandal. But how should the NCAA handle this situation from here on out? That's next on First Take. Stephen A., do they force a Game 7?
Golden State? No. I wish they would. I mean, listen, I crave a rematch between LeBron James and Steph Curry, with LeBron having Kevin Love and Kyrie healthy and the Golden State Warriors fully loaded. I crave it. I wouldn't be unhappy about that in any way. Trust me on that. But I just think that I see a little something different in Kevin Durant's eyes. I see the game is still there, and even though he's missing shots at times, you know, when the big moment arrives, I mean, he's not just scoring, he's leading this team. And Russell Westbrook is putting everybody on notice that he's one of the top 5 players in the world. He's one of the top 5 talents in the world. This dude is on another level. When you combine that with Billy Donovan and his ability to make adjustments, the size and physicality and their ability to impose their will on the opponents, I just think that OKC is coming together. I can't see them losing Game 6 on their home court Saturday. I'm not rooting against them for any, any reason, any negative reasons whatsoever. I would just love to see Steph Curry and LeBron meet, and so we can validate or invalidate Golden State's title from last year, since LeBron was all by his lonesome with his primary guard being Matthew Dellavedova. But unfortunately, I just think it's one of those situations where Kevin Durant is putting the world on notice that he and his team, they're coming. And I find it hard to believe that OKC is going to lose on their home turf in Game 6. Game 7, I couldn't pick against Golden State. But I don't know if they can get it to a Game 7 based on what I have seen them do throughout this series.
Unfortunately, I agree. I would also love to see a Game 7. Then again, if Golden State managed to steal Game 6, I'm not even sure I would pick Golden State to win a Game 7, because that would require 3 straight wins over Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. I don't know if the tank would be full enough, or it would just be empty. I would feel like emotionally, where I'm not sure they could get it back up for a Game 7, even at home before that crowd. And by the way, speaking of crowds, as you well know, this Oklahoma City crowd, if it's not the best 6th man in basketball, it's right. It's 1 and 1A with Oracle, and they're going to be out of their minds. They are going to literally raise that roof tomorrow night, which is why in the games I've watched Golden State play now at Oklahoma City this year, 1 in the regular season, 2 in the post, I've seen not enough signs of life from Golden State. I can't make a case, because I can't hang my hat on any one thing where I say, oh, well, they did that. Even the regular season game. Remember that great game on Saturday night on ABC? Oklahoma City was up 12 in the fourth quarter, and that was the old Oklahoma City, the baby Oklahoma City, if you will. They hadn't figured it, hadn't grown up yet. They had not figured out how to close deals. So it took Steph making the bomb of the year. Remember the 3 from, what was it, like 35 feet or whatever? to force overtime. Yeah. And then remember, Kevin Durant fouled out shortly into overtime, and still Oklahoma City had a 5-point lead in overtime, could not hold it. Steph scored 12 in overtime to win the regular season game. Then in games 3 and 4 in Oklahoma City of this series, it was a mismatch. Golden State overwhelmed, overmatched, overrun. I don't think it's going to translate what that heart of the champion that we saw last night, to quote the great Rudy Tomjanovich. I don't think it's going to be enough back in Oklahoma City. And Stephen A., as you know, last night, Golden State won all the hustle categories for the first time in this series, all the guts and toughness categories. They got to the free throw line 10 more times. They had 13 steals to only 8. They had 7 blocks to only 2. They did all the little things because they wanted the game more. They were more desperate last night, and now I can't see that that's going to travel. And listen, Kevin Durant last night in the fourth quarter was not very good. He was 3 for 10 and 1 for 5 from 3. He owes his team, and I will bet you he will deliver. He's going to be the man in this game, and when he's on against Golden State, he's just unstoppable to me. I know you say Russell's unstoppable too, and I get that, but Kevin Durant is just nuclear. When he gets it going,
I would never try to imply that Russell Westbrook's more unstoppable than Kevin Durant.
Okay.
Now, I know better than that.
Okay.
And I applaud Kevin Durant for attempting 10 shots in the fourth quarter.
Okay, that's fair. But he just wasn't quite on. There were times last night when I agree with you. In fact, I tweeted, Kevin Durant's got that look in his eye, and I thought he's just going to finish them off. And he lost it in the fourth quarter. Not going to lose it in 4 quarters tomorrow night in Oklahoma City. Which brings me to Steph Curry. Look, he was magic all year. And I'm not just throwing that around loosely. He was just like literally magic. He would do things we've never seen before. I don't think he's right now. I don't think his shooting elbow is right. I think it's still bothering him from the fall that he took where he had the tennis ball size swelling. And Stephen A., you know his three-point stroke. It's out of rhythm. He doesn't have the easy release from deep that he used to have. He doesn't trust his three-point stroke the way he used to. He made 3 last night that I think he just willed in. But, you know, for Steph, just 3 threes. And if you told me going into last night that Oklahoma City would out three-point shoot Golden State in Oracle 13-9, I'd say there's no way that Golden State's going to win that game with only 9 threes and only 3 from Steph. But he did the little big things down the stretch that saved the night and the day and the series. I don't trust him to go into Oklahoma City and just take the game over. He needs to make 10 or 12 threes for them to pull this off. He just doesn't look capable of that to me right now. So how do you make a case?
Well, I can't make the case. That's my whole point. I think that, look, Steph Curry's a superstar. And I might sit up there and have no problem with Russell Westbrook laughing because, again, I knew that wasn't the question directed to him, but I knew how he embraced it. And I don't blame him for laughing at that, but that's just defensively. And it's not to say Steph Curry can't play defense. It's just that he's not an elite defender. He's an elite offensive player. That's what he is, the greatest shooter I've ever seen. And I think he'll show up tomorrow night, and I think he's going to have a big game. But I just think that ultimately, I do. Okay. I just think that ultimately their guard play and perimeter play is going to be overwhelmed by the combination of the greatness of Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant combined with their physicality. I don't think Steven Adams is going to find himself in foul trouble. I don't think that the Enes Kanters and the Serge Ibaka's of the world are going to play small.
No,
I don't think a Dion Waiters is going to go scoreless like he did last night. No. I just think that they're going to all be so hyped at an opportunity to go to the finals. They're smelling blood in front of that crowd on their home court. And I think it's going to be too much for Golden State to overcome. If Golden State can overcome that, they'll win Game 7. I just think that they won't. And Andre Robertson will not at home foul out. He fouled out last night. It's a big blow to them because he's their elite defender. That last foul was a stupid foul on his part.
It was stupid.
That last foul was a stupid foul on his part. He's got to be smarter than that.
So do you think this will be a 10-point game, 15-point game?
I think they'll ultimately pull away and win by about 10. It'll be tight, but it'll just be too much in the end, and I think they'll pull away.
Feels more like 15 to me. Oklahoma City by 15, back in the finals, back versus LeBron.
Wow. So both of you guys agree Oklahoma City will close this thing out on Saturday night. Interestingly, they opened as a 2-point favorite.
Unfortunately, I just think it's going to happen.
In Vegas. It is only, if they close as the favorite, it would only be the second time in the last 2 seasons that the Warriors were not considered a favorite in a playoff
And by the way, the
game.
Warriors have been favored every game of this series, which is mind-blowing until now.
Correct. All right, let's move on. In the NFL, we know it is the land of second chances. The Ravens are giving Ray Rice one as they bring him on as a player advisor. Is this a good look for the team? We'll discuss that after the break. Are you okay with them bringing Rice back in this role?
I have no problem with it whatsoever. I mean, who better to teach about transgressions and moving past adversity than somebody who's had to endure it, obviously. That would be Ray Rice. He suffered. He lost millions of dollars. He's lost his career. He's not even 30 years of age as of yet, and he may never play football again because of how egregious his transactions were. And so being, you know, he's the walking embodiment of a life lesson and the ramifications of an egregious act and how it could potentially one mistake can ultimately ruin your life. And so I think that the fact that he's a walking embodiment of that and he can send that kind of message, it will reverberate throughout the franchise and throughout the NFL. I think you should have him in front of as many players as you possibly can to show them what could happen if they're stupid enough and egregious enough to make the kind of mistake that he made. The fact that the Baltimore Ravens did so, however, clearly showing a willingness to give him some kind of a chance in some capacity. I would also like to add, I think Ray Rice is incredibly, incredibly lucky that even a consideration is being given in that regard. Because Steve Bisciotti, the owner for the Baltimore Ravens, quietly and tacitly went about the business of trying to support Ray Rice. And Ray Rice thanked him by essentially diming him out about how, you know, he was insistent on telling the NFL and everybody else he told the truth, and he told them, and it's not true that he didn't tell them exactly what he had done and what had transpired. That's irrelevant. The man is trying to save you, and you're so interested in saving yourself that you highlighted what he may not have wanted everybody to know. And he was the one person willing to give you another chance, to give you a job, to make sure that you were still employed and that you could provide for your family. And all you had to do was shut the hell up, and you couldn't do it because you wanted to come across, at least in some category, as relatively righteous. And that was foolish on his part because Bisciotti made it very, very clear that he was a Raven and he was going to be a Raven for life. And somehow, some way, they would find a way to take care of him. He just needed him to keep his mouth shut. And Ray Rice failed to do that. So he's very, very lucky that Bisciotti and Ozzie Newsome and those guys have opened their doors and have allowed him to speak to the players. And I hope other teams do it as well, because I think Ray Rice does deserve a second chance. I would like to see him get an opportunity to continue to play this game again. But in the event that he doesn't, I don't believe that he should be somebody who is unemployable for the rest of his life. He has paid a heavy, heavy price. And he has conducted himself with the level of contrition that we would like to see the Greg Hardys of the world and others do. Let's give this man credit for that and open the doors to giving him some kind of second chance.
Well said. And obviously, Stephen A., in no way, shape, or form are either of us remotely trying to condone what Ray Rice did to his wife in that
Not
elevator.
at all. Not at all.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you brought up Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy has been my measuring stick, my barometer for the redemption of Ray Rice, because Ray Rice has done everything he can on the flip side of what Greg Hardy hasn't done to redeem himself, to win back some respect and the ability to ease back into the Baltimore organization. Obviously, Ray paid with it. I don't think he's going to play anymore. I could be wrong, but boy, it doesn't seem like it. So I'm pretty sure, paid with his on-the-field career. And I don't think it's right that he should have to pay with his potential off-the-field career with that organization that he clearly loves and that still has affection for him. despite all that's happened. But Greg Hardy, as you well know, he has shown zero contrition, zero remorse. He's taken zero responsibility or blame for what he was certainly accused of doing, to the point that he recently told our Adam Schefter, "I've never laid my hands on a woman." Wow, news to us. So again, when I see way over here to what way over here has done, Ray Rice has done everything he could to redeem himself. I don't know what else he could do, unless I'm missing something here. He has been a model citizen since that incident. He's done it the right way, so I don't think anybody could begrudge him the opportunity to counsel players, to be a liaison to young players, to say, this is what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, and to sort of nurture them, to bring them up the right way in pro football. I would welcome him back to that organization.
So would I. So would I.
So beyond the idea of him being this advisor, who you both seem to agree he is perfectly suited for because he is essentially taking responsibility, even by doing this, even by speaking to these young players about what has transpired in his life since, do you see him playing again? I know you've touched on it, but is this a step towards him playing again?
The problem with Ray Rice not playing again has very little to do with this incident, believe it or not. If Ray Rice had the stature, meaning the potential that Greg Hardy is perceived to have on the football field, Ray Rice would be back in the league this season. I have no doubt in my mind about that. The problem with Ray Rice is the combination of his transgressions combined with the fact that he was averaging approximately 3 yards per carry. People looked at him and said, he's not that great. And if you're not that great and you bring negative publicity, because no doubt there are going to be people out there that don't want him to get another chance, then the negative publicity is not worth it because his playing ability doesn't measure up to snuff. If Ray Rice was Adrian Peterson, let's say, for example, it wasn't a child abuse scandal that Adrian Peterson found himself in. It was domestic violence. I promise you, Adrian Peterson would be on a roster. I promise you that. If he had done the same thing that Ray Rice did, he would be on a roster because he's universally recognized as one of the top 2 running backs in all of football. It's just that simple. Ray Rice is far from that. That's why he isn't getting the chance, because people don't believe in his ability and that ability is worth the negative publicity that's going to come with it. That's the issue.
You're right. He was already in decline as a running back. And they age quickly in this league, as we know. So he's been out now. I'm losing track. Is it 3 years? There's no way. He's done as a football player. Close to 3 years. No. Yep.
But if nothing else, perhaps he can redeem his legacy with football fans. Coming up, is Draymond Green overrated? Hall of Famer Oscar Robertson had some choice words about his work ethic. We'll tell you what he said after this.
I think you like me like that.
The school's response to sexual assault allegations. Stephen A., what should the NCAA do about this situation now?
Whatever's necessary. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not satisfied at all. I know a lot of people are looking at the fact that the football coach is not going to be there. Skip, I think you know the individual. He's a broadcaster in Dallas. What is it, Dale Hansen? Am I correct in saying his name,
very
Skip?
Well. WFAA, Channel 8 in Dallas.
Yeah, I've met him once. I'm very fond of his work. I applaud him speaking out against Art Browse. It is the right thing to do. We've met Art Browse. He's been a guest on this show. He seemed to be a very nice man, but there was a flagrant dereliction of duty performed by him. As far as I'm concerned, he should be fired. He should be out of his job. It's just that simple. You can't be a football coach and have a bevy of sexual assault allegations and cases. I believe in one case, somebody's getting 20 years for his sexual misconduct, and all of this under the stewardship of this man's football program. It simply can't happen. But I'm not stopping there. To me, Kenneth Starr, that's where my eyes are right now. I am appalled at Baylor, the largest Baptist school in the nation, I might add. I am absolutely appalled. As far as I'm concerned, the institution itself should be disgraced. They should be embarrassed and ashamed of themselves right now. And I'm going to tell you why, Skip. This guy has been demoted, but he's still allowed to be a law professor and a chancellor. Now, this is to say, first of all, it reeks of hypocrisy on the part of Kenneth Starr, because you got to remember here, we're talking about instances where they're accusing the institution of higher learning, that is Baylor University, of a dereliction of duty, not taking heed and paying attention to the complaints being levied against students and football players, dragging their feet, ignoring complaints from parents and others, etc. This is the same Kenneth Starr, if I remember correctly, Skip, who was the independent counsel leading the investigation of Whitewater and the White House scandal involving intern Monica Lewinsky, and which led to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton back in 1998. So you're dogged and dogmatic in your approach to sit up there and bring down a president who, as egregious as it may be, clearly was involved in something consensual, but you want to ignore folks who are saying that individuals associated with your school were raping and sexually assaulting people. Really? That's what you're doing? And somehow, in some way, this man gets demoted, but is still allowed to teach students and maintain the title of chancellor? And according to the reports, that's inexcusable.
Why is he his salary?
Why exactly? And his salary. His salary should be gone. He should be gone. Any relationship with Baylor University, he should be immediately stripped of right now. I'm talking about right now, not 10 minutes from now, not an hour from now, not a day from now. Now he needs to be gone. So if we're talking about Art Briles, the football coach, you got to remember this is institution-wide.
It is.
You got an athletic director that's being suspended and reprimanded, etc. But what they're doing is following, rules and the authority of their leader, which Kenneth Starr was. You take off the head, the body falls. Briles has to go because he just has to go. His name being associated with this, his program being associated with this nonsense, that's a given. But the fact that Kenneth Starr has not been fired and immediately removed from any association with Baylor University is an absolute disgrace. The NCAA should step in, mandate that he is removed from any and all things having to do with the university, having to do with students. A law professor and a chancellor after this nonsense and the hypocrisy with which you went after Bill Clinton, but you're not paying attention to folks that are sexually assaulting students on your campus. This is as egregious as it gets. And this is not the first time Baylor has been associated with something egregious. As far as I'm concerned, as long as Kenneth Starr is there on national television, I would encourage students not to even think about attending Baylor. I'm sorry.
And how about the athletic director, Ian McCaw, who is just sort of on probation now? Shouldn't he go also? It's the same. They're all complicit here.
I brought him up. I brought him up. It's just that if Kenneth Starr is the man running things, who knows what orders came down the pike? That's all I'm trying to say. Briles doesn't have that because, the football program, they are their own institution. So Briles could have done something about this conceivably. Starr definitely could have been a bit more diligent in his duties. Otherwise, he would not have been demoted. But why even bother allowing him to have a relationship with the university? It's disgraceful. If I'm a parent, I'm a parent. If my daughter wanted to go there, no, you're not going to Baylor. Not going to Baylor. Ain't going there.
Okay. Now let me answer Jen's question about what should the NCAA do. This is hard on me because I have a lot of friends who are Baylor alums, and I respect them all, and they love their institution. By the way, may I quickly read the mission statement of the Baptist University that is Baylor?
Please do.
Yeah, the mission statement. The mission of Baylor University is to educate men and women for worldwide leadership and service by integrating academic excellence and Christian commitment within a caring community. I get chills.
Forgive me for laughing. That's funny. That's really funny.
Okay.
What a bunch of hypocrites they sound like right now.
This is rampant hypocrisy. And Ian McCaw, the athletic director, was quoted fairly recently in Sports Illustrated as saying, our goal is to glorify God through the athletic department. Ooh, that hurts. Now, back to the penalties. This is the time the NCAA should swoop in and hit Baylor with severe sanctions. Significant loss of scholarships and maybe loss of bowls or postseason for a couple of years. Penn State got hit hard. You and I, if you recall, argued back and forth about this. I defended the Penn State community, the program, the fandom, which is a great fandom, obviously, the town it's in, State College, because I said that what that monster Sandusky was doing under the, sort of behind the scenes, if you will, that Joe Paterno clearly, to me, protected, that Joe Paterno paid for with his job, and you could argue with his legacy, that several high-ranking officials paid for with their jobs, that didn't benefit Penn State competitively on the football field. You see what I mean? But in this case, this culture that Art Briles was able to quietly create, it allowed many players, many good players, to stay eligible after they were getting away with abusing women, sexually abusing women. They stayed afloat. They stayed eligible. I'm going to take it so far as to say, because remember, I covered a lot of Baylor back in my days in Dallas when they were in the Southwest Conference, and Baylor always fought the negative recruiting of all their rivals in the state of Texas and for a while Arkansas, because the rivals would say, hey, why would you want to go to Baylor? It's too conservative. You're not going to have any fun at Baylor. Well, Art Briles changed all that. The message quietly being sent through the current players, through the locker room, to the recruits could have been, hey, come to Baylor. You can have the run of the campus. You can get away with just about anything here because football players rule. Football became their god at Baylor to a fault. So my point is, if you kept all those players eligible after they didn't just break NCAA rules, they're breaking laws. So it becomes, there's a moral question, then there's a competitive question on the field. Well, that benefited Baylor greatly on the field, so that's the NCAA's domain to say, hey, you need to pay severely for that because you got away with a lot of players staying eligible who didn't remotely deserve to. And I hear Paul Levine say on our air late last night, there are many more cases that haven't yet been reported here. I think we're still at tip of iceberg. This was a big, bad mess at Baylor.
It's interesting because you bring up the bevy of individuals that you know who come from the University of Baylor. Skip, this is no aspersions. This is not casting any aspersions on them. The likelihood is that they've had nothing to do with it. They're proud of the university for a far, far, far more positive reason. But what I would tell you to tell them is that makes it even more incumbent on them to step in and handle business. Yep. I'm not on the board of anything for Winston-Salem State University, my alma mater. But I can assure you right now, I know people, and I'm very well connected to power brokers at my alma mater.
Sure.
If something like this were going on, let me tell you something right now, and Skip, because you know this, I've pledged, $50,000 a year for the next 5 years, to my alma mater. Let me tell you something right now. If something like this was going on, and they didn't get rid if we had a Kenneth Starr type, okay, and they didn't get rid of him, and they were allowing something like this running rampant, I'd pull every dollar. I wouldn't give them a damn dime. I wouldn't hesitate. I'm telling you that right now. And I would encourage anybody that's associated with the university not to do the same. Kenneth Starr has to go. I'm not saying that I know anything about what the man did directly, but you are the leader of the university. Clearly, they think you did something wrong because essentially they've demoted you. What the hell is a demotion for? Get rid of him. How do you go and be a teacher, a law professor to students? How do you do that when you ignored the law, at least in the eyes of some? How do you remain as chancellor? How do you keep getting dollars from this university when you allowed such an egregious stain to taint this institution? and arguably into perpetuity. We'll never forget it. It's just ugly. The culture is shredded. It's gone. It's an awful culture that nobody should want to be associated with.
Yep.
Get rid of this man. If you can get rid of Art Briles, you can damn sure get rid of Kenneth Starr, particularly when Kenneth Starr, even more so than Briles, is in a leadership position. And on top of it all, he's more attached to the hypocrisy of it all because of how he went at Bill Clinton, but don't go after kids on his campus assaulting women left and right.
Rampant
Inexcusable.
Hypocrisy.
Inexcusable.
What phrase did you use to me earlier this week from the Reagan era? Plausible deniability?
Plausible
I assume
deniability?
That's what Mr. Starr is trying to fall back on right now, is plausible deniability. I didn't know.
Well, then why he get demoted?
He was presiding over this whole culture and sordid affair.
You're the leader. The buck stops with you.
Yep.
I'm not saying he did anything directly. I'm saying ultimately he's responsible for the perception that the university receives under his watch. He has failed in his job. He needs to go.
Yep. Well, as you well know, bottom line, that football organization, that operation, that program has generated millions of dollars for Baylor University because it has been on the upswing under Art Briles. Now it's going to cost them millions of dollars, maybe in lawsuits, probably in lawsuits. And to your point, a lot of these upstanding citizens and good Christian people who are alums, I think they're going to do what you suggest. I think they're going to start pulling some funds. So this is it's really going to set Baylor back.
They certainly have earned the criticism.
Go out there and hire a reputable coach. Hire a reputable coach. You get rid of them. Get rid of Kenneth Starr, even more so than Briles.
Well, for the record, gentlemen, the Big 12 Conference has said that they do not have the power to implement any sanctions against Baylor. And just a few hours ago, we heard that the university has plans to hire defensive coordinator Phil Bennett into the interim head coach position, probably to limit some of the chaos that the program has certainly brought upon itself. But if you consider the problem to be systematic, you may want to question the decision to bring someone in who has been in that program that has had all of these issues.
I agree with that, Jen. I totally agree with that. And keep in mind, there are other coaches that have lost their job. There are other administrators that have lost their job for far less egregious things. I mean, you got issues going on at Missouri. Folks lost their job there because of the perception of certain things. But it didn't involve sexual assault. It didn't involve that.
No.
If they lost their job for that, how come Kenneth Starr still has a job on that campus? Get rid of that man. Get rid of that man.
Certainly a conversation that will continue. Let's move on. Steph Curry looking like his old self in the Warriors Game 5 win over the Thunder. But can he do it again in Oklahoma City on Saturday night? We'll break down Game 6 when we return. Stephen A., has Draymond Green been overrated?
Well, I wouldn't say overrated. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that the guy averaged 14, 9.5 points, more than 7 assists per game. He averaged 35 minutes a game. He only missed one game all year. He's the Energizer Bunny, and he shows up every night, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Is he a superstar? Absolutely not. We all know who that is. We know it's Steph Curry. He's one of the greatest shooters in the game, even though he shot close to 38% from three-point range. No, that would be Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. We understand that. And on most teams in most situations, would he be just an average player? Yes, he would. But for this particular team, this particular system, this day and age in the NBA where you've got zone coverages and you can double bigs when even when they're off the ball, when you can foul dudes intentionally when they're not a part of the action. There's so many different things that go on today that didn't go on back in the day. You got to give credit where credit is due. He's benefiting from the times and the systems that are employed in this day and age, but he's taking advantage of them. And let's give credit where credit is due. Let's also remember, we can't ignore how much he facilitates this offense. He's an incredible passer at times. He really makes some really good passes. When you combine that with the fact that his toughness and willingness to get dirty and rebound is augmented by his ability to grab and push the ball up the floor and actually lead fast breaks, so guards like Steph Curry and others are in position to shoot the basketball, he's a vital component to the success of the Golden State Warriors. So if you're looking at his own individual ability on its face and saying, no matter the system, no matter the opponent, no matter the times, you know, Draymond Green is this, that, or the third, then he would be overrated. But that's not what you're looking at. You're looking at the times that we're living in, the system of basketball that's being employed, and the particular team that he plays for. And for this Golden State Warriors team, in this day and age of NBA basketball, he is a star and deserves to be recognized as one because of the multitude of components that he brings to the game. When he's on his game, Golden State wins. When he's not, they suffer tremendously. If the man couldn't play, it wouldn't be the case.
And by the way, he just got, Draymond, the 5th most votes to be on first team All-NBA, but because, as you well know, they require a center on the first team, DeAndre Jordan got that, even though DeAndre Jordan can't make a free throw, so he's on first team All-NBA. I don't get it, but that's just me.
I would have been a DeMarcus Cousins guy. That's just me.
That's fine. I can buy that. But anyway, Draymond got relegated to only the 2nd team All-NBA, which is still pretty great. So what is he in the end? He was the 35th pick in the draft, top of the 2nd round, because he's an undersized forward at 6 feet 7 inches tall who is pressed into duty oftentimes at Golden State into playing center. So I could even make the case that he belonged on the first team All-NBA because he did play some center and more effectively in many ways than DeAndre Jordan played center for the Clippers. Obviously, as you well know, Draymond has been the guts and the glue of this team at 6 feet 7 inches tall, which is exactly how tall Klay Thompson is. But in the end, in this series, as you well know, for once, maybe for the first time, Draymond is getting overwhelmed, overmatched, and frustrated by Oklahoma City's incredible length. They're just too tall and long for Draymond. Obviously, Steven Adams, Cantor, Ibaka, and Kevin Durant, they're just too long for him. Stephen A, he's just not that big. And he's not that athletic. He's a really good basketball player, and you read off the numbers. And by the way, he's a 39% three-point shooter, which is pretty great. But in this series, now he's getting frustrated. Now he's playing out of character. There were times last night I was just hiding my eyes. I want to see Golden State win just to get to Game 6, see what happened back in Oklahoma City. And Draymond was a disaster sometimes last night because he's playing so out of himself. He's playing out of character, out of control, trying to make things happen that he couldn't make happen. So my only issues with him in the bigger picture is, you and I have gone back and forth about this, and to Oscar's point, does he talk too much to opponents and referees? I think to my taste, he does. But he tries. That's how he gets this team going in ways that Steph, who can play pretty nonchalantly, and Klay, who can be pretty unemotional, they're not fire starters. They're not emotional lightning rods. This guy is. So I sort of look the other way at all the talking and the stare downs that he does because he's a driving force of this team. I don't love it, but I respect it because he plays a role this team needs.
I agree with that. And like I said, he's the Energizer Bunny, and that cannot be diminished.
No.
That's my biggest thing. That can't be diminished by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that can't be ignored.
Does he offend
that's just
you
where we
at
are.
all?
We'll see what happens.
Does it offend you that he talks so much?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. My attitude is that you don't like it, shut him up. I didn't see him talking a lot against Oklahoma City on the road.
Well,
because they shut him up.
Much room to talk. Yeah,
see what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
That's my point. You know, when you are in the heat of competition, I believe in doing whatever works for you. If it works for you, if it works for you and it's legal and legit, do whatever you can get away with, because in the end, it's working psychologically against the opposition. If they have a problem with it, shut you up. You got to remember, my all-time idol in sports is Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
Nobody talked more than him. But if you wanted to do something about it, step in the ring and do it. If not, then deal with it. I believe in that.
Yep, I agree.
Oscar Robertson certainly has a terrific resume, but I don't know if this will be the last time we have the legends of the NBA criticizing the new school NBA.
Sometimes Oscar comes across as a little bit of a grumpy old man, just occasionally.
Sometimes a lot of them
He takes
do.
some shots, man.
Back in the day, in my day.
He does.
Well, let's continue in the NBA. The Rockets have found their man, hiring Mike D'Antoni to be their next head coach. But is this a good hire or not? Stephen A. tells us why he doesn't think so after the break. The Lakers and the Nuggets. Stephen A., is this a good hire for that team?
I don't think we can say it is, because Daryl Morey told us that one of the primary focuses that he would have this offseason in looking for a coach was to focus a little bit on defense, because the Houston Rockets were ranked 25th defensively and 30 in points forfeited, if I remember correctly. And you hire Mike D'Antoni, the guy that Skip Bayless said should have the D omitted from his name because it's really Mike Antoni, because there's no such thing as defense when he's coaching. It just amazes me. Mike D'Antoni definitely could be credited to some degree with helping to revolutionize the game of basketball in terms of the way we were playing it to the way that we are, because before the Golden State Warriors ever existed, it was Mike D'Antoni who, just 7 minutes or less had that offensive system working for him and helped Steve Nash acquire 2 league MVP awards. There's no question that Mike D'Antoni knows a thing or two about offense. But at the same time, he lost his job in New York City. They looked better without him when Mike Woodson succeeded him. He lost his job with the Los Angeles Lakers, even though some would say who can be blamed for that because you're working for Jim Buss. There's nowhere to go but down. In the end, Mike D'Antoni is also the guy that could have won a championship if he was willing to listen to Steve Kerr and Sarver and others in acquiring Tom Thibodeau as his defensive ace. He wasn't willing to do that. Now, maybe he has learned the error of his ways, and you hear names like Rex Kalamian, who works with the Raptors right now, who was number 3 defensively in terms of points allowed this year. You hear that. And you think about it, but my attitude is, if that's the case, why not just give Rex the job? Why give it to Mike D'Antoni? The only thing that I'm left to say is that Mike D'Antoni is clearly an exceptional salesman, because somehow, some way, despite the fact that he's never won a Western Conference crown and certainly not an NBA crown, the man continues to land jobs. From Phoenix to New York, from New York to L.A., now L.A. To Houston. These are not shabby jobs that this man ends up getting. Somehow, some way, he keeps landing himself in situations where, he's in Phoenix, he's got Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire. He's in L.A., he's in New York, he's got Carmelo. He's in L.A., he's got Kobe. Now he goes to Houston, and he'll have James Harden. Somehow, some way, this man continues to land good job after good job after good job. I find it amazing, and I'll tell you this. If I want a salesman, I definitely hire him, because whatever he's selling, somehow, some way, folks continue to buy. I give him credit for that.
Well, one guy bought it, and what intrigued me yesterday was that our Mark Stein, who does a fabulous job of covering the NBA, reported that Leslie Alexander, the owner of the Houston Rockets, he was the one who wanted Mike D'Antoni. That Daryl Morey's choice, or at least Daryl was leaning toward bringing back our Jeff Van Gundy in a return visit to be head coach of the Rockets. And obviously Jeff still lives in Houston. That indicated to me that Daryl Morey is losing a little power in that organization. I'm just reading the tea leaves from a distance. But to your point, yeah, well, that's fair. But there's something about Mike D'Antoni in interviews where he speaks the owner's language, some owners anyway. Like he knows how to push the right buttons, say the right things, that an owner would want to have an ongoing relationship with Mike D'Antoni. I don't know him. I know a lot of people who do know him. He's very personable. He can be very charming. I'm just guessing that Leslie Alexander going forward will look forward to socializing with him, to having an occasional lunch or dinner with him, because he's good company, he's good conversation, he's insightful, he tells you what's really going on. I'm just guessing, but that's how a lot of guys can talk their way into multiple jobs without the track record to back it up. I'm just going to assume that that happened in this case because, again, according to Mark, not Daryl Morey's first choice.
Well, look, Daryl Morey, when you deserve to lose some clout when you fire a coach that took you within 2 games of the finals, just 11 games into the following season. You deserve to lose some clout when it's believed that the superstar is making decisions that you're supposed to be making. Yep. I can tell you that Dwight Howard is not going to be enamored about staying in Houston with Mike D'Antoni there as the coach. I can promise you that.
Well, they clashed when he coached him in L.A., yeah.
Well, James Harden, it might be the best thing for James Harden. Listen, again, it's the process, and that's what people don't understand about me. It's the process. You see so many coaches out there who deserved opportunities and have worked hard for it, and then you see same old guys being recycled even though they haven't won anything. In D'Antoni's case, he did average 58 wins at 4 seasons in Phoenix, but lost the job there and moved on in New York because he wasn't willing to listen to Steve Kerr and Sarver. I pay attention to stuff like that, and I'm saying, how is it that he continues to land a job? I know that Mike D'Antoni has the capability of doing a good job, particularly in this day and age, the way basketball is played, where it's primarily about offense and not about defense. But the flip side to it is, how do you get to that point? How do you continue to land these opportunities at the expense of so many people who are starving for just their first opportunity? Sure. This man is on his 4th. It's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And by the way, they're saying that Jeff Bzdelik is going to be the defensive coordinator. So I don't know what that does for you, but it doesn't do a whole lot for me.
Well, he does have a career record of over 500, and you did mention James Harden, who is often criticized for his lack of defense, so maybe there is an alignment there with D'Antoni and Harden. They have a previous relationship, having worked together in the Olympics several years back. To football again, Des Bryant has been known to throw up the X, but he's not alone. We'll show you who else was doing the move after the break. You do not want to miss this. After spelling his last word correctly and tying for the Spelling Bee Championship last night, Nihar Jenga threw up the X in celebration. Des Bryant noticed it, and he had this to say on Twitter: "You just made my whole day, buddy. Congrats on winning the Spelling Bee Champ. Somehow, someway, I have to get you to a game." Now, Nihar is from Texas, but the Houston area. So what does this say, Skip, about the Cowboys being America's team?
Stephen A. Smith, this closes the case once again that my Dallas Cowboys remain America's team. We have a kid at the Spelling Bee from Houston, which is anti-Cowboys country. He's throwing up the X. I loved it. I appreciate it. It's just another indication that you are behind the times and out of step because you've lost sight of the fact that my Cowboys still dominate everything. Even the Spelling Bee is dominated by my Dallas Cowboys, who remain the consciousness of America.
First of all, I know plenty of people from Houston who are Dallas Cowboy fans because the Texans haven't been much to root for, although I think Bill O'Brien and Rick Smith had them pointed in the right direction. Having said all of that, just because the Cowboys, particularly their fan base, is the most pathetic fan base in the history of America, the fact is that there are players worth rooting for. Emmitt Smith, Troy Aikman, the playmaker, etc. And of course, the one and only Des Bryant. That's my man. I love Des. Just because I don't like the Cowboys doesn't mean I don't love Des Bryant. So I applaud the kid for knowing who to root for on the Cowboys, even though his favorite team might be highly questionable.
How about them Cowboys?
Thanks for tuning in. Have a happy Memorial Day weekend, guys.